Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only, Mexi here once again, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Mario's Picross for the Game Boy. So, last time, we basically did manage to solve, I would say, 25 puzzles here and there. So as a result, technically speaking though, we are essentially pretty much almost done in terms of easy Picross. So as a result, we actually got 10 puzzles left before we move on to the main attraction of this particular game, which appears to be the regular Picross itself. So yeah, we are essentially 10 left to be able to try to complete every aspect in terms of easy Picross. So yeah, everything else checks out there basically. So today, for this video, is that we should be able to actually finishing up every single aspect in terms of easy Picross before we move on to the regular Picross with the forms of the Mushroom Course, or specifically a Japanese translation with that particular mushroom's name. But we'll get into more details about that if we dive into that particular part. So with that being said, let's go ahead and try to wrap things up in terms of the easy Picross at this point. Usually we'd have to go through 10 more puzzles to go. And yeah, you pretty much get the idea how this is going. So anywho, so with that being said, let's go ahead and dive straight into puzzle 7-G, if I can recall. So as a result though, there's nothing else I can really say about this, I suppose. Well, apart from the fact that, well, today's date, of course, there is the 3rd of December today, in some cases in 2025 today, and there's actually quite a lot going on today at this point. Like, first things first though, is about the fact that, as you probably already expect, not only for the fact that we're able to expect to see a new theme coming up for the likes of the forms of Tetris 99, which heavily focuses on Kirby Air Riders for Nintendo Switch 2, but also is about the fact that not only we can able to try to celebrate one anniversary, but 2 anniversaries within both Mario games. Likely, for instance though, happy 15th anniversary of the game's release of Mario vs. Donkey Kong Mini Land Mayhem for the Nintendo DS. And while looking back on it though, it's actually pretty dang good, I'm not gonna lie. Although certainly is a lot better than the forms of how it does and how shallow it was, for the sake of the forms of tipping stars in my opinion. Although regardless of such though, we haven't exactly gone back into the Mario vs. Donkey Kong games ever since, you know, the most recent remake in 2024 last year, which appears to be the first game but remade from the ground up on the glorious Nintendo Switch, of course. So because of that, yeah, I got nothing else to say about that. Although I was expecting to try to able to actually do that game at some point, but here's the thing though, it's probably likely going to be delayed until specifically either next year or something like that, or perhaps even maybe until 2027, I'm not entirely 100% sure on that front, because even then, well, mind you though, it has been about a couple of hours since I actually have last played this game right here, because obviously though, for those of you who don't know, yes, I finally managed to fully 100% everything in terms of Donkey Kong Bonanza recently, because as a result, the only thing I was missing on in terms of trying to achieving the 3-star ranking, and that's what actually requires me to be able to go after the majority of the music CDs, which it does take me quite a few hours to able to actually get to that specific point, although there's also another alteration with that by simply trying to able to buy them with the actual, well, the Banana Mania chip kind of NPC or something like that, but that can take far too long, and on top of that, it does requires a lot of grinding. But I'm sure enough though is about the fact that the easiest way I can able to try to do that is by hitting back into one of those layers in the endurance test run. But regardless of such though, I'm probably not going to mention for that, because obviously though, it might able to actually contain spoiler elements, so yeah, we'll skip to that point. So, but that being said, and also worth knowing for too, happy 10th anniversary of the game's release of Mario Luigi Paper Jam Brothers, specifically for those of you who live in Japan. And while looking back on it though, to me though, after 10 years since when it first came out, this is definitely by far the weakest Mario Luigi games in my honest opinion. Although don't get me wrong, the gameplay is good, and the soundtrack is, well, I would say it's pretty good and stuff like that. Although aside from that, the story feels a bit pretty generic, and on top of that, the world themes are very generic, you know, almost inspired by New Super Mario Bros. World themes and stuff like that. Nothing new or original, or anything else to be more specific, but still, regardless of such though, the graphics are pretty passable, even especially noticeable on the 3DS. It does look pretty good on the system, but it's just that the world themes are pretty much just generic as it stands or traditional. So because of that, although don't get me wrong, I found that game to be pretty good, but not the best in the world, but still. And on top of that, the Papercraft battles, while looking back, I found it to be very clunky compared to the forms of how it does it for giant battles in Bowser's Inside Story, and heck, even with the forms of Dream Team Brothers, despite there are some motion control reliances here and there. But still, regardless of for its time, I still find that game to be pretty good, while not nearly as the best entry in the series, because that still honor goes to not only Mario Luigi Bowser's Inside Story, specifically the original DS version, and on top of that, of course, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door with either the Switch remake or the GameCube original, or a mixture of both. So because of that, yeah, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day. What's your thoughts of looking back on Mario Luigi Paper Jam Brothers for the Nintendo 3DS? Do you like it as much as I do? Or do you not a big fan of it though, but that's mainly because of generic world themes and all that stuff. All I will say is that the humor is pretty thin. Get it? Because, you know, some paper characters are like paper thin character development here and there. Although I totally appreciate about the fact that unlike, you know, that infamous Sticker Star game, that Paper Bowser does not have any other dialogue in, you know, that infamous Paper Mario Sticker Star game. But thankfully though, in Paper Jam Brothers, or Paper Jam, for those who've lived in North America, they obviously managed able to have dialogue for Paper Bowser at the very least. So that's something, alright. So, anywho, the next thing I want to point out too is that I did recently check out the comparison with not only the Switch 1 version, but as well as the Nintendo Switch 2 version of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. And the good thing I decided able to actually go for the Switch 2 version, which I'll get into more details about that, if we dive into the specific reason why I tend to go for the Switch 2 version later, as opposed to the Switch 1 version, aside from, you know, graphical standpoints, or to be more specifically, the graphical, well, you get the idea with all that, resolution, frame rate, and you get the idea. But there is one specific aspect I want to classify for something in terms of comparing the Switch 1 version to the Switch 2 version of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Although, relatively speaking of which though, recently though, the reviews of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond has already been up, and for the most part, they are basically positive. Apart from one exception to that, however, though, let's run down the list to see what specific review scores actually got revealed for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. So, for instance, IGN gives the game an 8 out of 10, and Game Informer gives the game an 8.75 out of 10, so it's almost perfect. And Games Radar receives the game 3.5 out of 5, and on top of that, Eurogamer receives the game a 3 out of 5. And then SAC News receives the game a higher score with a 9 out of 10. And as well as that, Destroyed gives the game a 7.5 out of 10. But there's one reviewer exception to this, however, though, and that's what appears to be Game Reactor. Game Reactor receives the game a 6 out of 10, and I'm just like, come on, really? I guess no matter what, though, that might be something to do with likely for it's like, well, it's hard for me to explain, but regardless of such, though, at the very least that, you know, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is actually doing really well in terms of review scores. The only thing I was a little bit concerned about is the actual sales for that game. To be more specifically, how much copies does it sell for the sake of the forms of not only the Switch 1 version, but as well as the Switch 2 version combined. So, I suppose we'll might have to wait and see what happens in due time, but regardless of such though, we have to wait on that, as far as I can definitely tell for the sake of time. So, anywho, now, in addition about the fact that the Sonic movie spin-off is going to be on its way until specifically in 2028, to be more accurate though, December 22nd, as far as I'm aware too, about the fact that there's also going to be yet another Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film is also going to be on its way too. So because of that, yeah, I've got nothing else to say about this, I suppose. Although, aside from the fact that it's going to be releasing also in 2028, but more specifically about a month before a Sonic spin-off movie, which as a result is going to be releasing at some point in November 17th. So yeah, I guess that makes it pretty obvious for the sake of the forms of some comparisons with all these release dates in mind. So, speaking of which though, is about the fact that yes indeed is that tomorrow Metroid Prime 4 Beyond for Switch 1 as well as Nintendo Switch 2 versions is going to be on its way, and seriously, it's finally going to be happening until for about, let's just say 24 hours later. So as a result though, the time has finally come, despite, like I said before, I'm probably not going to get the game day one though. I can wait and join at some point later this month, specifically for its Christmas celebration. So because of that, yeah, you can get the idea of what I was expecting at this point. So anywho, so let's get into the main elephant in the room in regards to the forms of the reason why I choose the Switch 2 version over the Switch 1 version of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. You see, for the fact that the resolution is pretty much fine on the Switch 1 version, but I will say though that the Switch 2 version definitely feels a lot more better looking, but there's one major reason why I go for Switch 2 version as opposed to the Switch 1 version, because of the loading times. On the Switch 2 version, it only goes for about 24 seconds, which feels a bit lengthy, but it's fine as it is. However, on the Switch 1 version, on the other hand, the site is able to go even more loading time length, and that's what it appears to be for about 1 minute and 4 seconds. And I'm like, yeah, I might as well go for a Switch 2 version just because the load times are much more superior, but that's besides the point. Despite the fact that the Switch 1 version still retains the 60 frames per second thing, so regardless of such though, it doesn't really matter what specific subject I would like to point out in terms of trying to go after the Switch 2 editions these days, in regards to the forms of some of these games coming out for it. But still, regardless of such though, I'm so appreciated that I somehow chose the Switch 2 version over the Switch 1 version any day. So yeah, you can get the idea about the fact that, you know, the load times are much more better in the Switch 2 version. So anywho, so with that being said, we're now on to the final row in terms of those puzzles in Easy Picross. So as a result, we're now on to level 8 now. So because of that, meaning about the fact that there are some convoluted shapes to create, so, but I'm sure we'll easily guarantee for the fact that we'll try to solve this no problem, I suppose. But regardless of such though, we shall wait and see. So anywho, the next thing I want to point out too is that Disney is planning a company worldwide celebration for Mickey Mouse's 100th anniversary until also in 2028. So because of that, get it, because you know, Mickey's first appearance was actually Steamboat Willie in the actual black and white cartoon back in 1928. So I guess that makes it pretty obvious they're trying to have some plans to celebrate that. So yeah, I guess that makes it pretty obvious. So, and the next thing I want to point out too is that I'm pretty sure for the fact that no matter what though, we're about to be getting yet another evolution for the sake of the forms of the entire DLC for Pokemon Legends CA for Mega Dimension DLC, and that's what appears to be Mega Lucario Z, which as a result, it does look pretty interesting to say the least, although despite the fact I wasn't really into Pokemon stuff as much as anyone else does, but regardless of such though, it will be pretty interesting to able to check out Mega Lucario Z transformation once that particular DLC comes around. I'm pretty sure we've only got about next week or so until that particular DLC is going to be releasing or something like that, although I may be wrong. But regardless of such though, that's as far as I can try to describe about it. And on top of that, we only got about 8 more days to go, or technically 9 days left for those of you who lived in the UK, for the fact that the Game Awards is getting closer and closer. So because of that, and hopefully by that time comes, obviously though, that'll be the entire conclusion of the gaming events of 2025 before we move on to 2026. So, anywho, speaking of something relates to Mario and what have you, obviously though, we actually got ourselves yet another update, or patch update, in regards to the forms of Mario Kart World once again. Except this time, Mario Kart World is now on to version 1.4.0, and my god, they bring up a lot of stuff once again. Although, allow me to classify for something by saying that it is nice to see custom item selection has been returning ever since, you know, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So because of that, yeah, because no matter what though, similar to the forms of how it does in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, you can obviously able to actually select custom items on not only for the sake of the forms of versus race, but possibly battle mode as well. So at the very least though, it's about the fact that it functions pretty much exactly the same as before, but only now for the fact that we have much more items than ever before. So for instance though, you can now able to actually turn off not only the pointless feather if you go on first place and stuff like that, but you can also now finally turn off the useless coin item, and on top of that, the fast food item, and so much more. So of course, much like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, you can either go on to blue shells only rules, and also it is now possible you can now able to actually just to like switch every single items off and keep one on, which appears to be the chemic orb item. So that way it might be of another possibility for you that if you couldn't able to actually try to figure out how to able to try to unlock those NPC characters at first glance, then it is now possible for you. You can now able to actually just start able to customize your item selection for the sake of the forms of what specific well, you know, you get the idea. So but I digress. So I'm sure enough though is about the fact that when it comes to Mario Kart World, I'm pretty sure you're able to actually got about, let's just say, 28 items to be more specifically. So as a result though, for the fact that we can pretty much guarantee for realize for the fact that you can now able to actually make your very own rules in terms of the items slots and stuff like that. So anyway, aside from the fact that the custom item rules is now a thing in Mario Kart World, so yeah, better late than never I suppose. So it's been like, well, let's just say it's been about almost 6 months since the actual game first came out, along with the Switch 2 itself. So regardless of such though, yeah, I'm very appreciated they somehow now finally have the custom items mode. So that way, this is a feature that lets you to set which item will appear, and this only supports in not only versus race, but in addition to balloon battle and coin runners and room in online play and wireless play I should say. And also for the fact that so it made the music track name and source title of the track has been now playing onto its pause menu. So because of that, imagine this, right? If you decided able to actually hear that familiar music track for the sake of any other Mario games, be remakes or remade for the sake of the forms of like, well, it's hard for me to explain because it has been about a couple of days ago since I actually have last played Mario Kart World, because at this point I'm still busy playing through, you know, Donkey Kong Bonanza, so that way I can finally get a chance to fully 100% everything in that game. And on top of all that stuff though, I will also try to able to actually go back on playing through Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment for a while, just before I can get my chance able to actually not only try to get Metroid Prime 4 Beyond on the Switch 2 version, mind you, and on top of that, with Dragon Ball Sparking Zero at some point in this year's Christmas, so just in case I can able to actually get my plenty of time before I'm able to actually dive into the next couple of games eventually. So because of that, yeah, that's actually pretty top-notch. But anyway, so yeah, like I said before, is about the fact if you do manage to pause the game, the music track name and the source of the title of the track is that is playing will now be displayed on the pause menu, so you can definitely tell what music actually comes from. So as a result though, I fully appreciate they somehow add that particular detail. And on top of that, speaking of music, they also added in the music volume into settings/control, so you can now set it on either normal or loud mode. So as a result, just in case you can able to actually try to hear the background music a lot more clearer if you set it on loud mode or anything else to be more specific. So yeah, that's what I've got in terms of that particular subject. The next thing they did somehow point out in terms of that particular version update, and that's what it appears to be, it is now possible that if you try to select, let's just say, if I can recall correctly, Koopa Troopa Beach, based off from Super Mario Kart variation, it is now possible you can able to actually go around that particular course within 2 laps this time. Like, for example though, if you try to go into there on versus race, for instance, if you try to select Koopa Troopa Beach, there's actually multiple options you can able to actually go into. Likely, for instance though, if you try to go into the intermission variations of, you know, if you try to go into Koopa Troopa Beach or something like that. Although it's a bit difficult to explain, like I said before, because it's been, you know, a couple of days ago since I've last played Mario Kart World on the Switch 2. Because, unfortunately though, I'm still going back on playing through Mario Kart Tour again for that stupid Team Rally system, because I'm still not a big fan of that. Because it's even bad enough we have to go for that a couple of times worth noting for until before hopefully Nintendo will end the actual support for Mario Kart Tour or something like that. Although I highly doubt it at this point, because even then though, it just goes in an infinite loop in terms of the forms of reruns of certain tours, as you can definitely tell. But regardless of such, yeah, anywho, and it's also worth noting for too, is that I'm pretty sure they also did manage to point out a lot of fixed issues. So, for instance though, they fixed an issue where the dash time was not correct after a charge jump, and they also fixed an issue where the player would slip through a wall when being stomped on from above a vehicle or by a vehicle driving on the road. And they also fixed an issue where a player would be squished when touching a thwomp that had landed. And they also fixed an issue where a bullet bill would not be displayed after using it. And they also fixed an issue where a character would be blurry even when making focus character when taking a photo in photo mode on the pause menu. Oh, and on top of that, in versus mode specifically, in single player mode, there's now a new option which appears to be restart. So this means about the fact you can able to actually restart your race if you not performed very well in terms of versus race while competing against with the computer players and stuff like that. So yeah, that's actually pretty swell. Although I don't think it's possible it's not going to be on Grand Prix mode or anything else to be more specific. So because of that, oh well though. Anyway, the next thing they did point out in terms of bug fixes and all that stuff, like for instance though, they somehow fixed an issue where the screen would look disjointed if entered a pipe at the same time as joining a free roam in online play. And they also fixed an issue where a player could not get in a UFO when multiple players try to get in a UFO at the same time in free roam in online play. And they also fixed an issue where a friend's information would not be updated when looking at the list of friends in online play. So yeah, that's a bit of a mouthful when it comes to friends in and friends in over and over and over again. But regardless of such though, anyway. And they also fixed an issue where there would be a connection error or communication error when looking at a group ID in view room info when participating in a group in friends in online play. And they also fixed an issue where a player's place would go down if retiring during knockout tour in online play. And they also fixed an issue where I'm pretty sure there was actually a well, let's say there's also another error where basically though they also fixed an issue where a player that is seen when spectating looks like they are going off the course over and over during knockout tour in online play or wireless play. So, and they also fixed an issue where the player's own character or vehicle would change when starting online play or wireless play again after quitting a game after knockout tour in online play or wireless play. And they also fixed an issue where a player would get stuck on a wall when using a bullet bill while falling off the course in Sky High Sunday. and they also fixed an issue where a bullet bill will go outside the course when using it on the final curve in Boo Cinema, and they also fixed an issue where the player would slip through a bulldozer in Toad's factory, and they also fixed an issue where the player would get stuck on a spotlight in a race that heads from Toad's factory to Bowser's castle when transformed into a bullet bill. So yeah, that's sure it's something, I guess. And they also fixed an issue where if the player used a bullet bill or a spiny shell in the first curve in Desert Hills, it would get stuck on a rock. So yeah, I guess that's something. And they also fixed an issue where the player would get stuck on a tree when using a bullet bill on DK Pass. And they also fixed an issue where when a player was small because of lightning, they would slip through the wall on the final curve of DK Pass. And they also fixed an issue where the player would get stuck on a billboard when transforming into a bullet bill in a race that heads from Crown City to Desert Hills. So yeah, I guess it's that. And they also fixed an issue, as far as I'm aware, they also fixed an issue where the player would slip through the ring of stone when using a bullet bill or mega mushroom while falling in great block ruins right before the final curve. And they also fixed an issue where the player would get stuck on the ground on the meadows near Big Donut. And they also fixed an issue where the player would slip through the wall if rewinding after wall riding in the special room they can go to from the pipe in Shy Guy Bazaar. And they also fixed an issue where the player would still fall into the lava even though they have smart steering on in Dry Bones Burnout. And they also fixed an issue where the player would go off the course when using a bullet bill while rail riding in Wario Stadium. And they also fixed an issue where the player would not be able to glide if getting on the glide panel while gliding in the race that heads from Wario Stadium to Airship Fortress. So yeah, and they also fixed an issue where the vehicle would float up on the rail while when the player did a rail ride after a wall ride in a bike type vehicle in Wario Stadium. And on top of that, they also fixed an issue where the player would go off the course when using a bullet bill on the shortcut while hitting from Dandelion Depths to Cheap Falls in the Ice Rally in a Knockout Tour. And they also fixed an issue where the player would go off the course while gliding while hitting from Dandelion Depths to Cheap Falls in the Moon Rally in Knockout Tour. And they also fixed an issue where a green shell would get stuck on the ground while hitting from Airship Fortress to Dry Bones Burnout in a Heart Rally in Knockout Tour. And they also fixed an issue where the player would go off the course when they transformed into a bullet bill on top of the building in Crown City below races. So for instance though, race that heads from DK Spaceport to Crown City and vice versa with any other tracks. And of course, most notably though, several other issues have been addressed to improve the gameplay experience. So yeah, you can get the idea how this is going. So anywho, so yeah, in terms of the forms of Tetris 99 new update, they somehow managed able to bring in the 50th Maximus Cup theme, and this time what appears to be inspired by Kirby Air Riders for Nintendo Switch 2. And no matter what though, it does look pretty cool though, when it comes to the forms of the actual UI or user interface and anything else to be more specific. Although the only drawback with that is though, is that there's no announcer or anything else to be more specifically to try to replicate that. But oh well, beggars can be choosers I suppose. But anywho, yeah, as you can tell, we somehow basically finishing up the forms of easy Picross, so we can now dive straight into the regular Picross, which as you can tell, we're about to be going into yet another set of puzzles to solve. So, now, apart from the fact that I was expecting something actually, that I was expecting to try to do the next video until tomorrow, but I might actually take a break on this for a little while, because I'll let Blaze the Cat will able to actually change her mind to potentially trying to able to conclude the entire Let's Play of Donkey Kong Country 3 for the Game Boy Advance, because the reason why I have to say this is because since this particular game might felt a bit very lengthy, and oh, would you look at that, we've made a Game Boy pattern, so yeah, that's actually pretty swell, especially considering how the Game Boy did somehow got this game right here, along with the sequel, Mario's Picross 2, only in Japan though, because aside from all that stuff though, it might actually contain jam-packed full of other levels that was not appeared in Mario's Picross 1 on the Game Boy, which I might be wrong about that, but regardless of such though, and it's also worth knowing for too, the background music also changes a bit, so because of that, yeah, you can pretty much get the idea about the fact that, yeah, every once in a while, the more we try to go along, obviously though, the music decides to change up a bit slightly, so because of that, I get the feeling that something tells me we're about to be making a simple star shape, which technically we've already made a star shape before, since on the easy Picross mode, but now we're able to actually now make it a little bit bigger, and on top of that, we can now able to actually have eyes on them, so just in case it's trying to replicate the actual power-up from the likes of the forms of any other Mario games, so at the very least, ever since in 1985, from the likes of the original Super Mario Bros. For the NES, so, or Famicom for those who lived in Japan most notably. So because of that, yeah, I guess that's all I can really talk about in terms of the forms of today's discussion, as far as I can definitely tell. Oh, there's also quick last honorable mentions in regards to the forms of something anniversaries related, since that, technically speaking though, Donkey Kong Country Returns on the Wii version specifically already came out 15 years ago, since likely in the Japanese version or something like that, although I may be wrong. But during that specific point, not only for the fact that there's also not one, but 3 anniversaries to celebrate when it comes to 15th anniversary. Like for instance though, for those of you who lived in the UK, happy 15th anniversary of those games releases back in the forms of the 3rd of December in 2010 for those of you who lived in the UK, which appears to be, as I mentioned this earlier, Donkey Kong Country Returns on the Wii, and on top of that, Super Mario All-Stars, the 25th Anniversary Edition in the UK version on the Wii. Despite the fact that while looking back on that particular re-release of Super Mario All-Stars on the Wii, it just basically becomes like the laziest port ever, because it simply gets like the Super Nintendo game slapped onto the Wii disc, and there's no loading times in between. So logically though, you can able to actually try to read for that game no problem. It doesn't really matter if it has like scratches on it though or something like that. But still, regardless of such though, it's a nice little novelty when it comes to Mario fans such as myself, so I digress. And also, happy 15th anniversary of one of those episodes in My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, and that's what appears to be none other than Look Before You Sleep, which does feature not only Rarity, but also Applejack and Twilight Sparkle are the main focus of that episode. And gee, while looking back on it though, it still feels a bit cozy to me in regards to the forms of watching that episode, although some bronies out there found that episode to be not that great, especially noticeable because it just feels a bit pretty standard, although to be fair though, that back in 2012, that was the first ever episode I've actually come across into before I became a brony of all things, so yeah, I know, strange, but regardless of such though, I just found that episode to be pretty cozy time, so because of that, although it wasn't until specifically until next week that one of the episodes in particular, which appears to be Bridal Gossip, is going to be also 15 years old until specifically until next week, and then the next week after that, what appears to be Swarm of the Century episodes, where it does feature Parasprites, and not only that, when it gets close to Christmas Eve during that time, that will mark the 15th anniversary of Winter Wrap-Up. So because of that, yeah, we'll discuss more about those particular subjects and during at some points later on throughout the majority of the month, so And at that point in time is about the fact I don't think it's possible we can able to actually get a chance to see yet another Nintendo Direct, because at this point in time, all of the Nintendo Direct presentations are basically done in terms of 2025. I mean, overall though, I think the actual lineup of Nintendo Directs are pretty solid for the most part in terms of 2025. Like, while looking back on those, we only got, let's just say, one partner showcase which does manage to take place in summer, much like the Bonds of how it does it in 2022, and in addition to that, with 2024, I think so anyway. Well, only slightly in terms of the forms of in August month, along with the forms of ND World. So, yeah, I guess no matter what though, and we also got not one, but two general directs, which obviously focuses on one of them, what it appears to be for Nintendo Switch 1, and then the other one which has a combination of not only Switch 1, but as well as Switch 2 games here as well. And not only that though, we also got the general Direct focuses on Nintendo Switch 2, so that was the main special attraction in terms of the forms of something to be looking forward to. And I'm sure enough though, until at the very start of 2026 if possible, maybe there could be the possibility I can able to actually keep on doing a lot more of those Nintendo Direct reactions at some point, because even then, I had a lot of fun time doing that process. Well, mind you though, we only did done 2 episodes on it so far, or technically 3 if you want to count the forms of the reveal of the Nintendo Switch 2 system itself back in January in 2025. So, I mean seriously though, it's been almost like 11 months since the Nintendo Switch 2 finally gets revealed during that time, and still, it is such an incredible experience whenever I finally managed to get a chance to play my glorious Nintendo Switch 2, although despite there are some controversial statements during that time, but regardless of such though, I honestly don't mind about it too much at the end of the day. But regardless of such though, I'm still looking forward to see what's going to be up next for Nintendo Switch 2 in terms of the games library during at some point in next year in 2026 and even further beyond. Especially noticeable about the fact I'm still very curious to know if, imagine this right, if Switch 1 still gets supported and stuff like that during in 2026, I get the feeling about the fact that when it comes to Switch 1 stuff, it's most likely going to be having some small amount of games. To be more specifically, a lot of emphasis on, well, some of them are actually got like brand new installments, don't get me wrong, like, you know, with Rhythm Paradise Grove, and on top of that, there's also, or Groove, I should say. And on top of that, Tomodachi Life Living the Dream. And on top of that, I think that's as far as I can really say about this, I suppose. But regardless of such though, that I get the feeling there might be some more remasters of some of these games coming up for Nintendo Switch 1. Because I'm pretty sure enough though, when it comes to brand new entries or something like that, it'll be most likely on Nintendo Switch 2 for the sake of time. So because of that, although, then again though, it is kind of unfortunate that we're probably not going to get the next installment in terms of Animal Crossing for the time being, because, you know, the Switch 2 edition is going to be on its way until for about next month or so. So because of that though, yeah, it kind of sucks for, there's no new entry or anything else to be more specifically. It's just, basically, it's like a direct port of the Switch 1 game, but fully enhanced with some capabilities and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's kind of sad though, but still, regardless of such though, that's as far as I can really try and describe it or something like that, but even then, so... But still, regardless of such though, that, yeah, it is still also unfortunate that, yeah, much like 2020, 2022, and 2023 and 2024, obviously though, E3 has been absent throughout the majority of it, so because of that, I mean, for the love of God, it's been 30 years since E3 did somehow first appeared in 1995. Never since then, obviously though, we've got continuous amount of years in regards to the forms of E3 celebrations during that specific time, that obviously though I do still remember back in, let's say in 2011, all the way up to 2019, I got instantly getting hyped about the forms of upcoming games, not just by the forms of Nintendo Wii, but in addition to the DS games here and there, well, some small amount of DS games, and on top of that, the majority of the 3DS stuff, and even with the existence of the miserable failure of the Wii U. And not only that though, also for the sake of the forms of the successful Nintendo Switch, in regards to the forms of more games have been revealed in the E3 press conferences or live streams to be more specifically these days, because the last time they actually did done the press conference was back in 2012, where they did manage able to try to bring up not only the Wii U itself, but in addition to that though with Nintendo Land. Although I do still only remembered for the fact that Nintendo E3 2008 was horribly despised by a lot of fans out there because of the existence of Wii Music at the very end of that particular press conference. And because of that, yeah, it is really laughable while looking back on it though, especially because, well, I used to have Wii Music back then, but suffice to say though, I no longer have that game anymore, because let me tell you, that game really bores me to death with its repetitive gameplay interface, and not to mention though, it just contains like babyish kind of music tones to it, like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and I was like, are you for real? I mean, I really do wish if we were able to actually get a chance to experiencing Nintendo-themed music, but most of the time though, the music selection in Wii Music is very questionable from a lot of people, so... But I digress. So, again, I got nothing else to say. I mean, it's just about the fact I'm very, very appreciative for the fact that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is doing pretty well in terms of review scores. So as a result, though, it might be actually be well recommended, by the way. Specifically the Switch 2 version specifically, because if you know, graphical fidelity, and also, as I said before, the loading times on the Switch 2 version might actually be, you know, a lot more better than the forms of how it does on the Switch 1 version. So because of that, yeah, I can totally understand why that most people attempt to go after the Switch 2 version over Switch 1. So, because I'm pretty sure at this point is that Switch 1 might be underpowered. Although, again, don't get me wrong, it does still retains the 60 frames per second on the Switch 1 version, but the only questionable thing is that on handheld mode, it might actually dip the actual picture quality for a little bit, at least in terms of resolution. So that's just what I was expecting. So anyway, it looks like we somehow made the hanger right there, despite the fact I did somehow failed once, but that's okay though, because I didn't pay attention to the forms of those specific numbers display on the actual top portion of the screen right there. But oh well. No big deal though. I suppose we should probably do 2 more puzzles right here, and then once we're done with the last puzzle in level 1 in Mushroom Course right there, then I'm sure enough that we can easily guarantee to resume the actual continuation of this game, probably at some point on Friday, because like I said before, I will let Blaze give her a bit of a benefit for the doubt in regards to the forms of trying to go back on experiencing. Or to be more accurate though, just try and let her try to conclude the rest of the forms of, you know, Donkey Kong Country 3 at some point until tomorrow, because I know for a fact that she was originally trying to go back into that game at some point in this coming Sunday or something like that. But apparently though, she really wants to cut to the chase at this point, especially because at that point in time, like I said before, the majority of the uploading schedules for this year, I must admit it though right away, just feels a bit kind of slow sometimes, unlike the forms of how it does it that we somehow managed able to get everything else in check when it comes to not only in 2021, but in addition to that with 2022, 2023, and 2024 respectively, because whenever we do manage able to record something, and as a result we managed able to actually edit those in due time, and no matter what though, depending on the actual time schedule, then we can easily guarantee to upload those videos in the exact point in time, without any some sort of major delays or anything else to be more specifically. I feel like that 2025 just feels a bit all over the place when it comes to uploading schedules in my opinion, but then again though, we'll get into more details about my final thoughts of 2025 once we dive into the final Let's Play of 2025, but then again, we can't tell for sure what it is just yet. So anyway, let's do one more puzzle for today, and suffice to say that we've already made a bus earlier. So because of that, oh gee, this shape is going to be pretty self-explanatory, because after all, we can able to actually try to just do this, and we're able to actually just able to create this little tiny little ring right around it, and suffice to say, I think I get the feeling we're about to be making some sort of like a, let's just say it's almost like a very similar kind of shape as in one of those jingly bells, but it has like this specific name to it though. So because of that, we'll try to able to like figure this out though, as long as we don't mess up for about 5 or 6 times. So, oh geez, it's not looking that great, but regardless of such, we'll just have to like do this right here, and let's just go ahead and try to do the same thing from the other side. Okay, that should probably does it. And now we need to create the center portion of this image, and god dang it, I've always ended up missing one tile or more left. So was it oh wait a second, I think there was like 2 more tiles to break. So is it this one and that one? Ah, there we go. Oh jeez, that was close, because I almost first thought I was almost gonna mess up at the end, but regardless of such though, I somehow pulled this off no problem. So either way, we got ourselves a tingle. So with that being said folks, is that we should probably end things up at this point right here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Mario's Picross for the Game Boy. Is that we're going to be going into level 2 in terms of those more puzzles to solve in Mushroom Course, and eventually at some point, likely in level 6 or something like that. But we shall wait and see what happens in due time. So anyways, I'll see you guys until on Friday. Later fellas.